You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is April 22nd, 2026, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special show. We are going to be interviewing the leadership of the Sacramento County Libertarian Party. So we have both a new chair and a new treasurer, so John Ward and Allan Reynolds. So we'll be talking with them a little bit more as the show goes. We also have, as part of our panel, our regular Leon the Word Brathwaite, Last Word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And my name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So essentially, this is going to be kind of a get to know the Libertarian Party of Sacramento. But before we do that, we always start with a Liberty quote of the day. And this time it is actually going to be from David Boaz. So if you're sort of familiar with the Libertarian Party at all, you'll certainly recognize him. He was the vice president of the Cato Institute for many years. And he had this really good quote that I thought really kind of sums up a lot of what libertarianism is about. And he says, it's the exercise of power, not the exercise of freedom, that requires justification. And, you know, yeah, I mean, if you think you need to use force against somebody, to me, that's what requires the the burden of proof. So anyways, what do you guys think about this quote? I think it's a pretty powerful quote.
Let our guests go, John and Allan, please.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, I like the quote. David Boaz always had a way of putting things. Things look a little bit different when you start assuming freedom rather than assuming the exercise of power.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for a lot of people that don't think particularly hard about, you know, the nature of political power, they just kind of assume that whatever goals they want to see, you know, the government has the right to do it. And, you know, I think it's important to realize that whenever the government's exercising power, you know, that's a pretty high bar that you need to justify. And most of the time, you know, you can't meet that justification.
Well, I think liberty and freedom is the natural state of human existence. And whenever a central authority or a central power comes along and say that it must interfere with our natural state, then it must be obviously justified. However, I think too much of our society are now heading along the path of where central power is becoming more important than individual liberties. And this is a real problem. We're here to talk about we must ban speech because it's hate speech. We must ban speech because it's disinformation. We must ban speech because it more offends certain religious groups. These are all interference of our natural state, which is liberty and freedom. So I guess the author of this quote is absolutely correct. When you are using power to interfere with our natural state of liberty and freedom, you must have a good justification and some rational basis for doing so.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's sort of almost a natural law type of quote, you know, thinking that, hey, look, this freedom is assumed, you know,
Yes.
you know, we shouldn't assume that somebody else has the power. But anyway, so let's jump into the Libertarian Party. And so I'm going to bring up the Libertarian Party's national page. So obviously this is a national party, but we have, you know, a lot of county entities that are part of that national party. And so we're going to be talking about the Sacramento County Libertarian Party today, and they have a page as well on the Libertarian Party's web page here. And that'll take you to the Facebook page and Twitter page as well. But let me before we jump into anything, let's see. well, let's start talking, I guess, about the Libertarian Party, I guess, as far as how did you guys wind up, deciding to become into leadership? John, you're the chair, and Allan, you're the treasurer. How did you guys decide that you guys wanted to do these roles, and why?
Well, if I can talk first, I was active in the party for a while, but mostly in Santa Clara County. I moved to Sacramento, but I didn't transfer my membership to Sacramento County right away until Allan approached me, and I think I should pass it over to him now.
Yeah, I mean, interesting question. I mean, I've only actually been a member of the Libertarian Party for about a year. Before that, my registration actually bounced back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. And I've been interested in libertarian ideas since high school. And so I've been kind of committed to this worldview. And, I was always kind of figuring out which party is more libertarian-ish, whatever. And I just realized that in the last couple years, both parties had gotten so bad that I was just kind of done. I can't vote for either party. I'm not interested in any of this anymore. And so for me, the options are just totally disengage and just check out, or get involved in something else. And so I decided, for the first time, to kind of get involved in the Libertarian Party and see what's possible in this space. And John and I are friends, and he had told me about his experience with the Libertarian Party, and I thought it seemed like a interesting idea to get the local party active.
So was there something in particular that clarified your stance on liberty for you? What was it that I mean, you said you became disenchanted with both political parties, the major parties, I assume you're speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
Was there something in particular that clarified it for you, that made you become a libertarian or accept the whole liberty movement?
I mean, for me, like I said, I've been interested in libertarianism since high school, and I've always pretty much considered myself one. And I knew neither party was particularly good on liberty. But, I think, especially seeing just how politics has devolved with Trump and kind of both parties becoming more extreme in all kinds of different ways, seeing like the tariffs and the just kind of giving up on free markets and free trade and all this. It had gone too far. I mean, both parties have gone too far. So I don't know if there was a single thing that did it. It was just kind of over time. I think probably like a lot of people, I could hold my nose and vote for one or the other, but it just sort of became too much. So I think just a lot of things.
Was there any particular thing that just pushed you over the top? I know for me, it was kind of issues where I used to be, I came from a sort of a conservative family. And so I had, when I went off to college, I was exposed to some other ideas. And it was sort of like I started questioning, well, why is it that alcohol is legal and marijuana isn't? And why is it that maybe marriage can be between a man and a woman, but not necessarily two other partners? And these things, I wasn't finding satisfying answers from from the Republican Party, which is kind of what sort of pushed me over the edge. Was there some particular issues for either of you that sort of pushed you over?
There's no particular issue that pushed me over because I was never a member of the Democrat or Republican parties. I learned to drive pretty late at age 18, and as soon as I got my driver's license, I registered to vote, and I had to choose a political party. And I chose the Libertarian Party, but I didn't really mean much by it at first. It just seemed not to be Republican or Democrat. In college, I realized that I needed more intellectual justification for the beliefs I had, because I didn't want people to misunderstand what I believed. I wanted to be clear in my head so that I could explain them. And that led me briefly to becoming a very hardline libertarian. I went through the classics as much as I could online for free, and I'm really grateful to all the organizations that make the text by Mises and Hayek and Rothbard available for free for people to read, and the Bain Free Library and all of that. I'm not a hard. I don't think I wouldn't describe myself as a hardline libertarian now. I think for me, the Libertarian Party is just a political party, and political parties have to be effective. They have to care about practical matters. But I do have that background sort of to establish my bona fides.
And for myself, just kind of actually, Jason, kind of a similar background. You know, I grew up in a very conservative religious community, which in a lot of ways was great. But there's a lot of things about it I loved, but I was definitely always kind of intellectually a bit detached from it and alienated from some of it. And so when I went up to college, I ended up studying philosophy, ended up going to graduate school for political philosophy. In high school, I did the traditional thing, got into Ayn Rand, devoured all of her books, got into, read the kind of free market economists, Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell. And, for me, like once I understood the case for, free market capitalism, it was kind of impossible to unsee it, and you can never quite go back. And then, like John, read all the classics, so for me, I was always a believer in the ideas. I was very drawn to that. And in grad school, I got a bit connected to IHS, Institute for Humane Studies. And through that kind of met some, got involved in the kind of libertarian community and really enjoyed that. And then, like I said, I'm not really sure why it took me so long to join the LP. I think it was mostly the case that I, like a lot of people, just assume that third parties don't work in the US. There's no point. So you just got to pick the least of, the lesser of two evils kind of thing. But the whole time I've been pretty committed to the ideas.
Yeah, I got to say, the Libertarian Party, I had no idea really what they were until sort of, through Stossel, I saw Milton Friedman and then Free to Choose. And then I'm sort of understanding. But, even when I tell other people about it, they're like, the Librarian Party. I mean, people are like that. They're a lot of times they're locked into this false dichotomy that there's only two parties out there. So I do have this short video from the Libertarian Party that they put together about 7-8 years ago. And so I think maybe if our viewers haven't got the idea of what a libertarian is, I think this video will kind of clue people into the Libertarian Party and what it's all about.
There's only one political party in this country that stands for all of your freedoms, all of the time, for all people, all places, at all times, and it's the Libertarian Party.
I'm chairman of the Libertarian Party. We're the only political party in this country that really believes that you have a right to live your life however you choose, to pursue happiness however you choose, as long as you don't hurt other people and you don't take their stuff.
We want peace. We want low crime. We want people to have opportunity, education, healthcare. We want people to be happy and harmonious and tolerant of each other and free to associate and just live their lives how they want.
If the Libertarian Party was a business in any other part of the marketplace, every investor on earth would be investing in that business.
We're going to have a party where people know how to run a candidate, they know how to raise money, they have candidates who run before, they can be in the press, they have press contacts. We haven't had that in the past. We're now trying to get someone to understand that you can be free. You don't have to have the same type of government you've had for the past hundreds or thousands of years.
You have these two parties who are dominant in the country, and they agree to rules that make sure that either a Republican or Democrat will win.
Look at what works. Be open to considering that what actually works is freedom.
And by the way, that was the past chair. The current chair is Stephen Nikila, and we had him on the show a while back. So just so nobody's confused who might be watching us out there. So anyways, yeah, so the Libertarian Party, it just seems like I'm not sure why there aren't more people who are associating themselves as libertarians. Like that guy was saying in the video, you know, if this was something you could invest in, you know, these ideas are so much better than the other two parties. I just don't understand why we don't have more. But yeah, so anyways, what do you guys think are the challenges here in trying to get our party to grow here in Sacramento?
Just a quick comment on kind of the video and what you just said. It is surprising. I agree that libertarianism got weirdly boxed out of both, you know, major parties, because, you know, when you like look at public opinion polls, you know, a lot of people's beliefs actually line up pretty closely with libertarianism. And yet they don't have representation. And so it is interesting that we've kind of found ourselves in this place where, you know, of what should be a pretty popular set of ideas just has virtually zero representation. And it is kind of odd. I do think it provides an opportunity for recruitment. You know, once you kind of break through to people and share what the ideas are, I think a lot of people will find them pretty compelling.
Well, I don't think it's odd, quite frankly, if you want the truth. I think the Democratic Party in particular, and Republican to a lesser extent, they sell one thing, and that is, I'm going to give you free stuff. They never tell you how they're going to get that free stuff. They're going to get it from somebody else to give it to you, which is just a form of modern day slavery when you think about it. But and that's forbidden if I don't know if you're religious in your beliefs, but that is forbidden in the Bible. But that's a different discussion. I'm not trying to be all religious and spiritual here. But that whole, I think it's very intoxicating when you have politicians telling you you're going to give you free stuff. And I think that is what drives our politics here in America today.
I have my own theories about why that might be the case. I think there's something deeply hypocritical about the United States in the way we glorify democracy, but we hate each other. We hate our fellow countrymen. We hate the populace. The politicians hate the voters, that they need to vote for them. And there is a deep institutional fear of opening up the playing field. And I think that fear is to a certain extent justified, but it's also short-sighted, because the dangers that come from populism can happen just as easily through the major parties as through a third party. And I am hopeful to a certain extent that despite all the terrible things that are happening now at the national scene, that people are waking up to the fact that the big seal of a major party is not a guarantee of candidate quality. That people are finally understanding that and are willing to open their mind and take a step down the long, hard road to something more like a multi-party democracy.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, when you talk about this sort of where we've gotten to almost hate that seems to be happening between the people of the different parties, and it's almost inevitable, I think, though, when you have a large government, because as government gets larger and larger, it comes at the expense of all of our liberties, and it very much starts to become a zero-sum game. So if one side gets their way, it literally means the other side doesn't get their way. And the bigger government is, that's on a whole lot of things. So I just wish there was some way we could get this message across to people through our party and I don't know, get people to come to their senses. I mean, what are some of your guys' ideas for maybe, bringing the Libertarian Party into more visibility in Sacramento? I mean, are there some items that you guys have in mind, like, maybe, some kind of outreach, or, I don't know, some sort of gatherings or something like that?
Before we go to the question, please, if I may just make one last point. And you just talk about government getting larger. Government gets larger to do one thing and one thing only. It's to give away free stuff. You may continue. I'm sorry, John and Allan.
At the expense of our liberty.
At the expense of, thank you. At the expense of our liberty. Thank you. Okay.
And yeah, before moving on, also just I want to comment as well. It is true, as government grows, more things in our lives get political. Everything becomes politicized, and it's, and then suddenly, like, the beer you're drinking is a political statement. And if you, suddenly everything is a tripwire. Everything causes people to hate each other. And it is kind of insane, and in a libertarian free society, we would not have to worry about these things because the government would not be involved in them. And so, there would be just less stuff politicized. But now it is kind of insane. All the kind of litmus tests people have for, you need to believe this whole list of things, otherwise you're the enemy. Even though, like, normal people, none of us have power. We're not doing this. This is our politicians doing it to us. So yeah, I agree with John that there is this we're in a weird state where, we're very much pitted against each other, and we need a way out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, John, what are your thoughts on strategies for growing the party here?
I'm going to say something that people probably aren't going to like. That is, there's no perfect strategy. There's no royal road to liberty. It's a slow boring, is the expression. You need good fundamentals, and you need to keep them up. You need to be honest. You need to recruit good candidates and run them repeatedly, even when the odds of any individual candidate succeeding aren't good. You need to be there and be a constant presence and be visible in everybody's, be present in everybody's mind as an alternative, as their second best choice, so that when something goes wrong, there's some sort of phase transition, you'll reap the benefits, and you never know when that's going to happen. It's unrewarding in some ways, but it's not hopeless. It's actually very exciting, thinking about what could happen as a result of getting involved.
Yeah. Adding on to what John said, yeah, I think our biggest goal now, we're kind of in a phase of building the party up where we really need to just be visible. And so, for example, we're doing a tabling event at an Earth Day thing in Sacramento this coming weekend. We'll be at the State Fair with a booth. Yeah, just the more we can be in front of people, being a live option for them, I think is important. I personally, I'm attempting to get my paperwork together to be a viable write-in candidate for state assembly, because in my district, I actually live in Yolo County. My district, there is an unopposed Democrat running, and as long as I file all the paperwork, if I get a single vote in the primaries and there's no other write-in candidates, I would get my name on the ballot in the general election with Libertarian Party underneath it. And it's things like that where, this time around, I probably might not necessarily win, but it's, I think, really important for people to see alternatives, because like I said, I spent my whole life not even thinking, like being a libertarian, but not even thinking about the alternative. So yeah, it's like John said, just kind of slowly building, getting people in. We want to do meetups, kind of like in-person gatherings, and tabling and things like this. So we'll see where that goes.
I noticed you said that you were running against a Democrat who's running unopposed. So I guess, is this something that I guess liberty-minded people should be looking for, these opportunities where there's just one person who's running unopposed somewhere, whether it be a Democrat or Republican, and just throw your name out there? And then what all is involved in that?
100%. I mean, and I was actually contacted a couple weeks ago by somebody in the leadership of the state party who notified me, hey, in your district, you've got an unopposed person running, and then explained to me the process. Like, if you do the paperwork, if you go to the general, you'll get your name on the ballot. And so, I think that these kind of things are important. Libertarians need to be really smart about where are the opportunities in the system to sneak through like this, because they do exist, but you do have to kind of know the system. And so the state party is, there's someone in particular who's, I think, trying to recruit libertarians in all districts with where there's not a contested race. So yeah, I encourage people to do it. If those out there in District 4, if you see my name on the ballot in the general, I would appreciate the vote. It isn't a ton of work. I do have to gather 40 signatures of eligible voters, do actually quite a bit of paperwork. I mean, they don't make it easy to become eligible and run for office. It's a little bit obnoxious, at least this first time. Maybe it's the kind of thing that I'll figure out if I do this a couple times, but it's not insurmountable, but it, does take a little bit of time.
By the way, hold on. If you're watching us on public access right now, the conversation goes online, so you can catch the rest of this conversation at knuckleheadsofliberty.com. So, okay, go ahead, Leon.
Is there a fee associated with running for the assembly?
Good question. And I'm not an expert on this. I'll just tell you what I know. If you were to become like an actual candidate on the ballot in the primary, yes, there's a fee, and it's pretty. It's not cheap. I think it's a couple $1,000 maybe. But if you just make yourself an eligible write-in candidate, no fee. So this is another really benefit of doing this, because it's just paperwork and time.
Okay.
Well, and you never know too. I mean, the person you're running against may turn out to be an Eric Swalwell, and maybe you'll be the only person on the ballot.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's always something crazy happening like that. Also, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a libertarian is going up against, anyone else. Like people, I don't know, I can imagine getting 20-30% of the vote just because people are like, oh, not a Democrat. It's not a very blue county that I'm in. So I can imagine there's just going to be a chunk of people who are happy to see an alternative.
Yeah, especially in these times when things are so polarized. I imagine there's so many people who are looking for that alternative you guys were talking about earlier. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think in terms of opportunities for recruitment, like we are at a time when the two major parties are going kind of crazy and going off the rails in some ways. So I do imagine there are a lot of disaffected people in both parties who, like me, are like kind of approaching the line where they just can't do it anymore. So I do think there are folks who will be receptive.
So if you run for a political office and you do succeed, I mean, you have a set of core beliefs as a libertarian. How would you work in an environment where compromise is absolutely necessary? You may have to compromise with the Democrats. You may have to compromise with the Republicans. So if you end up in the assembly, how would you deal with those boundaries of your core principles?
That's a really good question. And I mean, you know, I've not served in office before, so this would be very new for me. But I mean, the interesting thing about being a libertarian is, in principle, I could imagine working with reasonable people from both sides on different things, you know? And so I think a libertarian can be a bit more adaptable and, you know, find bits of common ground here and there. But that said, I imagine I'd be casting a lot of no votes, you know, and that's a big thing. You know, a major part of my responsibility would just be to go and vote no on just like the endless, you know, new taxes and regulations and ridiculousness that they keep trying to push. So, but I would hope that I would be able to do something positive as well.
It's funny you say about all the no votes. I saw a meme of I think it was Massey recently, and it says, it has him they're asking him the question, why do you vote no on so many things? And he says, it's because I read them. I mean, most of these other people are just doing what their party tells them to do. Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I did want to ask you guys also too, you know, we've seen that the Libertarian Party nationally has come up on, you know, what we had a lot of hope, I guess, in some of the recent elections with Gary Johnson, gosh, about 6 years ago now or so. And in this last election, you know, I think we were a little more hopeful than how it wound up working out. But well, what are your guys' thoughts on some of the challenges just facing the National Libertarian Party and the branding there?
I think there's a lot of PR damage that needs to be fixed. There was a recent previous administration that I think did a lot of damage to the party, to not just to the PR, but also to the donor base and the membership and things like that. And it's my philosophy is that you can't rebuild without making some sort of structural changes. You need to make a meaningful a commitment to fixing the problems that led to that in the first place. And so I think National needs to do something drastic, something dramatic. I'm not sure what. There are various plans to reform how the National Convention works, how the elections work, and the power over the chair and things like that are worth looking into.
Do you have optimism for the current president, Stephen Nikila, and the group that's with him in there now?
I'm sure I'm always optimistic, and I want to believe the best. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
so good. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am interested to see the future of the party. I do think, yeah, it has, you know, it's had kind of a disappointing recent past in a lot of ways. I do think probably, you know, at the highest level, the presidential level, like that is just, you know, this system is so rigged against third parties, it's basically impossible. And I mean, you know, I think this was shown, you know, like the last, you know, like Ralph Nader, you know, with the Green Party, like kind of showed that it's basically impossible. But it, you know, it would be great for the Libertarians to have a kind of charismatic figure like Ralph Nader, you know, kind of like give it more prominence. But in the meantime, I do think that probably our best bet is at a more local level in running local in local races where, I think a lot more is up for grabs.
One thing I noticed just in the way these things are being run at the highest level is that just to get some good promo material to use for the show, I had to stretch back to 2019, and maybe that speaks to the last group who was running things. The idea that they didn't think that was important to put together some good messaging on what is the Libertarian Party, so that we could, get the message out to people that they really have another choice out there. Do you guys have any thoughts about, ways to sort of trumpet what we're doing out here?
Trumpet. Okay.
Well, I'm a big believer that it all starts locally. All politics is local, and that makes it difficult because with the way everybody is connected now through the internet. People have very little awareness of what's going on around them locally and local issues, and that's a challenge to connect people face to face, create real, authentic communities. But if you can do that through word of mouth, through local activism, through civil society itself, I think that's the key to rebuilding the party. It starts from the bottom up, not the top down.
But as you rightfully said, I guess I think Allan said you need to have some kind of message that you want to sell, and quite frankly, I'm not sure what that message is. Do you guys have any idea what is the message the libertarians are trying to sell?
I have a message, but I can't speak for everybody. As a chair, I have to be a little bit neutral. But candidly, I think that the current Republican administration is far removed from previous Republican administrations. It doesn't have the principles, it doesn't the values, the characters, any of the characteristics that what's the word that would that define it. And
the principle, maybe, yeah.
Redeeming virtues. It doesn't have it has the drawbacks without many of the redeeming virtues that the Republican Party has traditionally had. So being able to present ourselves as an alternative to the Republicans specifically, to oppose the Republicans effectively, and particularly the current Republican president, who has some very authoritarian tendencies. In fact, at this point, I don't even think we can call them tendencies. That being able to oppose that and say that we do that directly is important, but it's also important to pitch the messaging in such a way that we are coming at this from a libertarian perspective, not a traditional left-wing versus right-wing perspective. We don't want to collapse this into just the old culture war stuff of left versus right. It's liberty versus authority. And that's why I can't speak authoritatively, because the process of developing that messaging is something that requires collaboration. It requires feedback. None of us are all knowing enough to know what people want to hear. When the Libertarian Party was first founded, it developed out of a committee to establish a Libertarian Party, which was the predecessor. And I think in some ways we're still at that stage. We're still trying to figure out what the Libertarian Party is. And that's not about, well, let me put it another way. There's an economist who talks about the difference between finding people that are helping or could help and giving them the resources they need, and trying to create an organization that tells people what to do. That those are very different approaches. Seeking versus ordering people to do things. I think the Libertarian Party has to be an intermediary. It has to bring people together. Activate networks, create relationships.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately it seems like what we're selling is the idea that people are free to choose. So it's not we're telling everybody we want it one way, the blue way or the red way. We want it to be your way. You know?
Right.
And so I think, you know, that's kind of a harder message to sell, I guess, than something where they packaged their group of things. We're saying, hey, how about you do it your way and your neighbor does it their way, and we can all be happy. so
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think the ideas are pretty straightforward and pretty popular. Like people, you know, I mean, I agree with Leon. People do like redistribution that benefits themselves, but people do hate taxes. They do hate, you know, being told what to do. They hate, you know, there's this instinct for freedom that everybody understands and shares. And people all hate the government and don't trust Congress, and they know that our best interests are not being represented. So I think the idea, you know, is attractive. What's difficult is, I think, breaking through. You know, like to get this message out, it does take money, oftentimes, and you know, we are basically funded by membership dues in terms of the actual Libertarian Party as an organization. You know, which is not a whole lot. We have to pay annual fees to the state to just exist as a party, and it's just expensive to do things. You know, like there are the only way to do stuff for free is, you know, social media, I guess, but it's just really hard to, you know, break through. So I think this is an area we are still trying to figure out.
Yeah, and there are so many regulations and restrictions on political speech, and how we can spend money to get our message across. There's just so many landmines of what we can talk about and what we can't, when and where and why.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one of the things I guess I was hoping to get into, if you guys have time, but is the, you know, we live in Sacramento, and Sacramento is kind of next to Washington, D.C., is, you know, kind of one of the biggest political power centers in the country. And yet we see so many failings locally. And I think the same thing that people who are in the D.C. area with things like homelessness, crime, and affordability. You know, it doesn't just exist here, it exists there too. And it's no accident. I think that we have all these things. And I was curious maybe to get your guys' thoughts on some of this. I mean, I did have some real quick video intro just to get people on the same page with the homelessness and crime problem here, but just to sort of hear what libertarians think about this sort of thing. So let me jump into this quick video on the homelessness fiasco that we're having in this state, and the fact that they can't even trace the money for it.
It's the issue impacting communities across the state, homelessness. It's such a big issue that, according to the Legislative Analyst's Office, the state invested $24 billion over the last 5 years to curb the problem. But this just-released report from the California auditor found the state lacks the proper information to determine the ongoing costs and results of its homelessness programs because the California Interagency Council, or ICH, in charge of overseeing the implementation of Housing First policies, has, quote, not consistently tracked and evaluated the state's efforts to prevent and end homelessness.
And I can't help but thinking as we're watching that, and they say, we can't tell how it's going, and you see all those tents out on the street, right? I think it's not going well. Right?
We know exactly how it's going. Okay, it's not a pretty picture, but we know exactly how it's going.
But I mean, as libertarians, what are your guys' kind of thoughts on this? Because I mean, you can't help but walk around Sacramento and just see the problems everywhere, and all of the fallout of this. You know, maybe, you know, business is not doing so well because there's, you know, people, you know, sleeping on the street in front of their businesses, and maybe that's leading to crime in front of their businesses. And you know, I don't know. Do you guys have any kind of, just off the top of your head, thoughts on this issue?
I have some random thoughts. The situation described in that video where you the state has identified a problem and decided to spend money on it, spent money on it without really knowing what they're doing, and then is unable to find where the money went is sadly common. Bureaucracies create their own justification for existence. I also want to say that from a libertarian perspective, we're not like Republicans talking about, or Democrats for that matter. We're not just concerned about making things look good. We don't want to turn every place into a gated community. From a libertarian perspective, the optimal level of homelessness is not zero. People have the right to live on the street. The problem is if they have no choice. If the choice comes down to let people live the way they want, or as some people have suggested, institutionalize them by force, I don't think institutionalizing them by force is a libertarian solution. The two major parties would probably come at it from a more coercive direction than the Libertarian Party does. So they would have both a carrot and a stick. The Libertarian Party really only has the carrot. You want to create incentives, economic and housing incentives that make it easier for people to get back into, if that's what they really want out of life. And I think most of them do, but to get back into the situation where they're in stable housing and have a job and so on. And the key to that is housing policy, and is eliminating regulations and taxes that make it difficult to build new housing. And of course, every time you build housing, it shifts the curve so that the prices go down. Even building luxury housing decreases rents for people who don't live in luxury housing, because the people that would buy the luxury housing who have a lot of money are no longer competing with other people for the same units. They're competing for different units. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I've expressed that clearly. I might not.
Let me ask a question.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Lam.
Let me ask a question. I'm John. You just said that if the choice is between letting someone choose to live on the streets, or if there's some kind of forced institutionalization, you'll think the preferred libertarian solution is that they should live on the streets at their own choosing. But where do you draw the lines on that? I mean, I walk around Sacramento, I walk around San Francisco and various other cities where you see some people homeless and they clearly have mental problems. And there's no doubt about this. Even those people, you would not require involuntary institutionalization?
I would, only if they pose a recurring, incredible threat to the safety or the property of people. One of the reasons that people, I feel a little strange saying choose to be homeless, but there's a strong correlation, I believe, between homelessness and various mental conditions that induce paranoia, that make you untrusting of resources available to you. Not that is the only reason that people are homeless, but it's a contributing factor, and that seems to be a textbook example of the philosophy that mental illness is, in some sense, just extreme preferences. That if you are so constituted that you are unable to trust society around you, you should be able to opt out of society. And again, I'm not sure that I'm expressing myself clearly. I wasn't prepared to discuss this in particular, so I might not have been as clear on certain points as I should be.
I can share my thoughts as well. Yeah, it's in terms of the video. This I feel like this is a pattern of like these reports coming out. Millions, billions have been spent. They don't know what happened to it. The problem is unsolved. I mean, in California, like this is now just this is what government is. I mean, I think about the high-speed rail project. Like, what more? How more could this be in your face that the government is incapable of governing at the most basic level? And at some point, you've got to ask, like, this can't just be really well-meaning people just bumbling around and just spending wrongly. Like, this is almost by design, So this is not surprising that these problems are just consistently, like, not solved by government intervention. So, there are alternatives, and I agree with John that like housing policy is important. Like, it is insane that we have, politicians layering regulation upon regulation on home building, home ownership, on landlords being able to rent and evict people and so on. They just like overburden housing in every respect, and then are just like totally flummoxed that there's not enough housing. It's like, what do we do? And it's like the solution staring you right in the face, which is to radically deregulate housing completely, totally tear apart zoning regulations, let building of all kinds happen everywhere. And then you will finally have supply meet demand, which is what happens when you have free markets. So I think a lot of homelessness could be solved with like the free market solution for housing instead of this, more wasted money for NGOs trying to supposedly help people. I do agree with Leon's point that there is then some minority of the homeless that have very severe mental health issues or addiction issues. And I guess here, maybe this is not me not being a very good libertarian, but I do think that there is some paternalism is justified. And I mean, going back to the quote in the beginning, power does require justification, but sometimes you can justify it. Right. And in these cases, I think, we can say, look, being mentally ill and on the streets is not in anybody's interest. It's not good for the person. It's not good for the people, the businesses, and the people walking around town. So there should be an intervention, and it should be done in as humanely way as possible. But like, I think some paternalism and like sometimes you do need to require people to get the services that they need. So, I do think there's some room for that.
One thing I did like, I guess, when you said housing policy, and it was pretty much deregulation. It almost seems like, I hear housing policy and I say, hey, how about housing policy? Let's just get government out of it. That would be the policy. Unfortunately, the policy, usually when people say policy, they mean, hey, I've got a whole bunch of great ideas for government to get in here and make it better, right? and then we wind up with tents eventually.
Yes. So the idea is the government policy, or the policy, if you want to say, is to get the government out of the housing business and keep them out. That's a policy.
Well, it's funny because, as you guys were saying, this is a sort of a complex issue. But, one of the things, too, that is true in both Sacramento and Washington, D.C., is that the housing, the cost of living is extremely high compared to other parts of the nation. And here's just payscale.com where they're talking about California, Sacramento, and the cost of living is 24% higher than the national average. And so, I mean, these are issues where, not only are we throwing all kinds of impediments into making housing affordable, but we're also just creating all kinds of other things that make the costs of living higher as well. And there was a really short news segment that talked about the costs of living in this area, and I think maybe I'll pull that up real quick. It's pretty short, but it shows how much money is considered essentially low income nowadays. And it's eye-popping to me, because those amounts, when I would have thought when I was a kid, hey, that's a lot of money. Let's show this quick video.
New numbers show California's affordability crisis growing. In some counties, even a six-figure salary qualifies for low-income housing programs.
The cost of everything only getting worse as groceries, gas, and keeping a roof over your head increase for Californians across the state.
Yeah, the report shows that the California dream is becoming more and more unattainable. Whether you're renting or you're buying, the salaries that people once strive for often are no longer enough.
So exactly what kind of a salary is considered low income around Sacramento?
New annual figures released by the state show low-income eligibility for affordable housing is surging. A $72,000 salary now qualifies as low income in Sacramento, Placer, and El Dorado counties. That's 9% higher than 1 year ago. In San Joaquin County, the new low-income level is now listed at $58,600. In Stanislaus County, it's $55,200. Low-income eligibility in the Bay Area is now a six-figure salary.
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of nuts, how, we're living in sort of the state where everybody's got a government solution, and things just keep spiraling farther and farther out of control. I mean, did you guys have any particular thoughts on this issue of affordability right now?
I mean, again, this is just like the classic case of like interventionism run amok. Is like, okay, people can't afford housing. They're having a hard time paying for it. Okay, well, let's do something about it. Let's impose rent control. And it's like, that sounds good. But what happens is now builders have less incentive to build. So there's going to be fewer new houses on the market. And that's going to make it even more expensive to get housing, which is going to result in another round of interventions to try to correct that. And it never stops. The problem just gets worse. Only the free market solution allows supply and demand to meet, where they belong at a market clearing price. So it's sad, it's really sad. I was born and raised in California. It's, a beautiful state. There's a lot of great things about it, but we've got to be honest, like California, people are fleeing the state, that what an indictment of, one of the greatest states in the country that literally, we have out migration because people can't afford to live here. So yeah, it's pathetic.
People are voting with their feet. Yeah.
Said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Classic example of an interventionary spiral where interference in the market leads to negative outcomes that are described as market failures and used as an excuse for further intervention.
Right.
When you inject more money into a particular sector, the prices go up. It's not surprising that a state with a government as large and powerful as California, that the cost of living is so high because there is so much money going after.
Yeah, I did have a quick video to tie this all back into the crime thing, but right here in Sacramento, this is about 3 years old, but it's a nice little video that shows how all of these policies, I think, kind of tie together. And so let me just bring that up real quick.
Neighbors and Councilmember Katie Valenzuela say issues began piling up along X Street and Broadway when homeless encampments were moved from under the WX freeway earlier this summer. In August, Jamba Juice closed its doors. A few weeks later, Starbucks did too, citing safety concerns.
Here's Starbucks. This used to be a place where families and people could sit and have their coffee in the morning. Now it's shut down and we've got it tagged all over the place. Is this what our city wants to see? Is this the revitalization that they've been talking about? Because I don't see it.
So encroaching homelessness leading to businesses shutting down. Will this lead to more crime?
Land Park Community Association Vice President Christina Rogers says she isn't surprised Wednesday's shooting happened just a block away.
Crime and drug dealing has exploded.
Rogers says she and neighbors want to see a crackdown on crime and assistance to the unhoused.
Was it a drug deal gone wrong? Or was this a homeless person who was trying to protect themselves from some sort of assault? We don't know that yet. But either way, it's wrong, and we don't want that to happen.
So, just how are we being impacted by crime here? This is just a crime map. It's a website that puts together all the reports called neighborhoodscout.com, but they have a ranking here of safest to unsafe, I guess. And of course, you can see all throughout the Sacramento area, it's varying shades of pretty much unsafe everywhere by comparison. But they compare it to the national numbers here. They say the total crime index, and they say essentially with 100 being the safest, we've only got a score of 5 here in Sacramento. and I mean, and they have a crime map too that they have. This is a 2024 map from the Sacramento City. And every one of these blue dots represents a crime that year that you can click on and find out information about. But it's just it's kind of a little bit overwhelming. I don't know. You guys have any particular thoughts on what's going on here, how this all ties together, maybe?
I mean, yeah, crime is a tough one. I mean, she mentioned, was it a drug deal gone wrong? Was it, what happened? I mean, as libertarians, we'd like to see, legal and safe drugs being sold that are not in the hands of criminals and so on. I mean, that's one of our more controversial positions, I guess. But overall, I mean, I think, libertarians, we believe in freedom and the right to do your own thing, including the right to own a firearm and things like this, but we are not permissive about crime. And I think from my point of view, crime is really a policy choice. Like cities are high crime not because they need to be or there's forces beyond our control, but because we allow it. Like we have the technology and the the resources available to prevent a lot of crime, to stop it. We actually know how to do it. This is not like rocket science, but we have policies in place that make it easy, that make it profitable, that make it go unpunished, that let I mean, it's a very broken system, and I don't think that again, like homelessness, there's no reason that no one benefits from this. Like it's bad for business, bad for people walking their kids down the street. Like it's bad for people who get caught up in, life of crime and gangs and things like this. And incentives work. And if you have incentives against it, you can deter crime. You can stop it. So I think it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, when you say incentives, I mean, we've seen here in California, we've tried to pass different laws. I think people with different intents, we thought the prisons were overcrowding. So then we said, okay, well, property crime under 950, then, it's just, I guess sort of a misdemeanor report type of thing. And so then we started to see Walgreens close all over San Francisco because of that, right? Because then suddenly the incentive is, hey, nobody's going to stop you if you stay under a certain price range, and $950 is quite a big grocery trip.
a lot of stuff is a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So anyways, so it just seems like we've got so many wrong-headed ideas in California that one compiles on the other, and like you said, even the drug laws. I mean, it's the idea of us, I guess, getting to a libertarian world there seems far away at this point, of being able to let people put what they want in their own bodies, and yet, we fill up the prisons and everything, with the current prohibitions, just seems like a really, tough nugget. So I don't know. I just wish we could kind of bring people into the libertarian world of ideas, but it just seems like it's really tough.
I think though we do have a bigger problem. I mean, what you guys laid out is absolutely true. But the bigger problem is that we have right now in our society, in many jurisdictions, where we have this tolerance of criminality and only the selective persecution of the criminals. Certain people, if they have the right, whatever, the right demographic next to their name or whatever, and that kind of stuff, is only certain people are getting persecuted. Too often we are seeing people get arrested by the police, and 2 hours later they're back on the streets and committing more crime. So this tolerance of violence or tolerance of criminality and the selective persecution of said criminality is a serious problem in our society, and this have to be checked. If not checked, the rule of law will disintegrate.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on this, but we are over an hour at this point, so we definitely have gone past the time we talked about. We did have a Knucklehead Noise Patrol, but we can save that for another week unless you guys really want to do it now.
Since it's past an hour and we can make a call to action now, I want to say that I want to apologize to everybody watching this for my bad opinions on everything, and I want to emphasize that I don't want to tell anybody what to think. I'm interested in hearing what people have to say, and I would just like to get people involved, and I hope that that some of the people listening to this will attend some of our events, that will contact me or Allan or somebody here at the Sacramento Libertarian Party and tell me what they think.
John, what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
We have an email address, office@lpsac.org. We also have a Facebook page, and we have a Discord. And I consider putting the Discord link here, but I would prefer to get that out only to people that we meet in public. So if you pay attention to some of the
is this the
places I
Facebook
mentioned?
page?
Yeah, the Facebook page. The Facebook page, the county party website, and so on. And keep an eye out for some of the meetup events. Not necessarily meetups, but some of the social events or party meetings or executive committee meetings that we're going to have. And if you see that, you can meet us there. Anything you want to add, Allan?
I mean, yeah, I guess just as kind of a last kind of message to promote the Sacramento LP, what I would say to people is, getting involved in politics can be like really invigorating. It's very demoralizing, our politics. Like, it feels like things are out of control. It's terrible. It's becoming really intolerable to be associated with either one. And instead of just becoming cynical and dropping out of it, join a party that has principles and has a coherent worldview and has something to offer, that has things to offer, specifically problems in California. So I do hope that people get a hold of us and become involved.
Okay. And like I said, the Sacramento Libertarian Party's been going on for a while. James Just, who works with us, used to be the chair, and I know they'd had events in the past. So let's hope we can keep the spirit rolling here. And for any of you who are watching before next week, think about what you can do in your community to move the ball for liberty. I mean, maybe reach out to the Sacramento LP or maybe the Libertarian Party in your community or some other way. I mean, we've seen, citizen journalists. Hey, they're doing a lot out there too today. These are things everybody can do. So think about what you can do in your community to move the ball for liberty. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.